I would like to thank the presenters that came this morning to the program. I'd like to thank Roz and Mallory and Matt and the other people that were involved in setting up the field day at the winery this morning. Geez, there's a lot of things just to touch upon. The meal was wonderful. The Organic Association did a great job of putting together local producers to find products to have on the lunchtime table. My aronia berries were on top of the dessert, so I hope you enjoyed that. The 1 acre aronia patch, which is organic certified, is right here. So that's where I got those aronia berries. And we could make this about aronia berries really easily, so I'll try just to not go down that rabbit hole. Soybeans. We're here to talk about soybeans. So Dr. Kathleen DeLate has been out for several years now. Is it 4 total? Three. So we've been doing this organic field trial, organic no-till practices. We've had no-till corn and no-till beans here. And so we will review that today. I'm going to start off by talking about what I'm doing on the larger 60 acres around it, because that is the practices which I have developed confidence in at this time. And this morning, as we were listening to Joel and the other people talk, I was developing kind of my my list of things that would help me stand up here confidently and talk to you guys. Okay, so the goal out here is not aesthetic perfection. Okay, so when I convinced my dad we should transition organic almost 10 years ago when it came to the aronia berries, but about 6 years ago we started transitioning this. His first question was, what would Grandpa think? You know? So as we got into that, I became an organic inspector, and I did that for a few years actively, which gave me a pretty steep learning curve about what I wanted to do, and that gave me more confidence to tell Dad I'm ready to start row cultivating again. Because I hadn't row cultivated since I was 13 and before Roundup was invented. So, you know, that, and he said I wasn't very good at it either back then. I'm getting better. So, I want to touch upon just a few things. I hope everybody had a chance to pick up a copy of my book. They were sitting on the table at the winery. I think I had just about the right number sitting out. On the cover of that book, there was a picture of a couple of my children on the back of a 750 no-till drill, and we were going through corn, which was a foot high. So if you look closely at that picture, if you're a farmer, you'll notice that doesn't make any sense. And what we were doing is seeding some covers, Balanza clover, and some other things which were talked about this morning in other presentations, interseeding in corn. It's expensive to do that when you're just experimenting on the farm, but I've committed myself to do a little bit of that kind of stuff every year because it just keeps pushing me forward. It helps me be more knowledgeable. So that's what that picture is on the cover. It's just a little experiment we were doing in corn that year. You know, this is a young organic system, and the mantra that I hear experienced organic producers say, and Joel mentioned it this morning, is that the really good organic producers have figured out how to integrate livestock and have figured out how to find, you know, more years of diversification in any way they can. And when I was organic inspecting, that's what I saw too. You know, there's farms that really have it down, and lo and behold, they've got livestock on the farm or livestock associated with the farm in some way, and then they've been in it for like 20 and 30 years. So it's humble to stand here only in this for 6 years, knowing the limitations of my system. So I came into organic with sort of a minimalist approach. I was just thinking, okay, first I don't want to screw up and not, you know, do things right. So not using any products is the best way to not screw up. So like was mentioned this morning, I have neglected lime, I've neglected peat, and I've neglected K out here. We're not seeing the impact of that yet, but I know I better get with it because those nutrients are probably disappearing if I'm not replacing them. You know, I believe the cover cropping accesses them from deeper in the profile, but they're not going to create them from nothing, is the science of it, right? So that's part of where I'm currently at. What I can attest to is that using a system such as roller crimping rye and planting soybeans first of all, is a wonderful way to transition to organic. I wouldn't have been able to transition to organic if I was going to have to be out here row cultivating multiple times in my soybeans. I have a young family. I just wasn't going to commit to that. But when I did the research and started talking to Dr. DeLatemore, I gained confidence in the system of roller crimping rye and planting soybeans. And that gave me the confidence to come out here. And the first couple years that we were transitioning, I grew soybeans both years of the transition with permission from my certifier. And the beans were so clean, people were coming by. They just couldn't believe that my field was the organic transitioning field, and the neighbors' fields were GMO fields with, resistant weeds that had gone crazy. It just didn't make sense visually. But we had clean beans out here in transition. The limitations of my system I won't dwell on, because I know what they are, and that's that I do lack some integrated diversity, and I lack livestock. But we get confinement manure before the corn, and it's put on with a drag line from a building that's across the way, a quarter-mile over there. So that confinement manure goes on before the corn. Another limitation is that we chiseled before our year of corn 2 years ago. So at that time, I just don't know what else to do to transition the corn other than working the soil. And, that goes against what I have as a pipe dream for growing corn, but that's how we transition to corn. So what we're looking at right now is the second year of soybeans. So let me be clear. I had 2 years of transition in soybeans, and then I had a year of corn, and now I've had 2 years of soybeans. So this is the second year of soybeans that I've been organic. I don't need to beat it in the ground too far that you don't have to grow a lot of bushels of soybeans to make money at $34 a bushel. Okay, so that matters. But what we have found is we can keep control of things using the implements I'm going to talk about today. In a moment, I'm just going to walk and talk, Emerson, and you can follow me. All right, let's do it. Let's just walk and talk, and let's head out into the field in front of the tractor that way. We'll walk past the roller crimper, and I'll tell you what's going on out here. So when I transitioned, it was a one-pass roller crimping setup. So this roller crimper was on the front of the tractor on a front hitch, and we planted 15-inch soybeans. I really enjoyed, and it worked well, planting 15-inch soybeans. This morning you kind of heard a spectrum of how organic farmers desire to plant their soybeans. The secret to me and success in those 15-inch soybeans was that we had the core up front of that Case IH soybean drill. So it looks like a drill, but those are planter units on the Case IH 15-inch row planters, and so we were able to use that curve and get the depth we needed while we were transitioning. We had good soybeans on 15-inch rows. I have transitioned more towards thinking 30 inches because of the unit we're going to talk about later, which is weed wrapping. So here you have a demonstration of how good I am at staying on the row, which coming into headland is not so great. But you get out here and you'll see our main pressure here has been foxtail. We are controlling the foxtail with a high residue row cultivator, which is sitting over there. It's a neighbor's. And with that high residue row cultivator, we can come in here and take good care of that foxtail. But the secret is not to move the dirt. We have a nice rye mat that was laid down with the roller crimper. It was not a heavy growth of rye. I'll talk about my planting rate and all that in a moment. But this year we did not have heavy biomass with rye. It was a good stand. And we came through here with the high residue row cultivator, dropped the back end of that shovel so it came through the ground flat. The objective was just to skate underneath it and chop off something like a turf layer, which is still intact. You see, it's just like a 2-inch turf layer, and rain came 48 hours later, but that foxtail is going to die. And you can see we got pretty good control over here. The broadleaves that are out here don't worry me a single bit. I see mare's tail. I see some ragweed. The weed zapper is going to clean that stuff up so quick, like it's not even funny. The weed zapper is an amazing machine that I believe has a place in the future of all agriculture in the U.S. As the technology comes along. So what we did here was we planted the rye. This rye we got a pretty early seeding. We got in here in September. Probably mid-September, and seeded the rye at 2.5 bushels an acre.
With a drill.
With a drill, a 30-foot drill. 2.5 bushels is all I can push that seed out with. And that John Deere air seeder.
You had beans in here last year.
Yeah, I had beans in here last year also. Yeah. So then we have the seeding, which was done 2.5 bushels an acre, and we did it at a slight angle. I told my neighbor to come in, seed the rye, and do a 3-degree angle. What we found over the years is the rye just lays down better, and the beans plant into it better when you don't end up on a row. So rather than trying to go all cattywampus weird with the planter, why not plant the rye slightly at an angle, and then you can come in here like it's a normal field and just plant your soybeans how you want. So that has worked really good. The rye was seeded at an angle. What is different in this 60 acres versus the trial that we'll talk about is that we came in this year and planted the soybeans May 14th. The rye was only halfway up my shin on May 14th. The soybeans, I've developed confidence that I've been seeing it on multiple years on other farms, and I've been recommending it to people. We plant the beans pretty early, May 14th, and let them do their thing. When anthesis came at the end of May, we came in and we rolled the rye. We wanted to make sure the beans were at the 3rd trifoliate. If you come in before the 3rd trifoliate, I believe it's Aaron Silva's research out of Wisconsin-Madison that says that you are likely to damage the beans if you come in there too early. So at that 3rd trifoliate, I was confident to come in, go ahead and roller crimp right over top of those beans. The beans are planted at 190,000 seeds per acre. In years past, what I noticed as I'd come across the field and slightly adjust that population is if I plant more like 150 or 160,000 seeds per acre, I'm going to get more weed pressure coming. And I've moved all the way across the field, increasing my population to 220,000 seeds per acre, and the weed pressure just gets less and less because your population of beans is going to cause quicker coverage, and it's just good. So when you see in the research coming out of probably what Joel's doing and what I've seen out of Madison, Wisconsin, they say 220,000 seeds per acre is recommended. I think, Joel, you said this morning 170 or 180.
We're now doing about 195.
Okay, so there's a reason that these are the recommendations. If you start pushing it lower, the weeds come, and if you're an organic farmer, you want to use your soybean population to take away some of those variables. So that's why we're pushing close to 200,000. I'm sorry, I'll answer you in a second, Andy. The first time I told my dad that we were going to go from 15-inch rows to 30, and we're going to up our population, not lower it, he looked at me like there's something wrong with me, right? So we continue to think high populations, and so that's just this system. You want some, So out here I said we had good biomass, but it wasn't too heavy. If we did have more biomass, it would have been a problem coming in here cultivating, because we planted with a 30-foot planter, we roller crimped with a 15-foot roller crimper, and we were row cultivating with a 30-foot row cultivator. So I was able to go against the direction I roller crimped. Thank goodness, If I would have had heavier biomass, and my neighbor did have heavy biomass, and when he was going against the direction he roller crimped, it's all of a sudden a big mess. And so he had to go through his field the same direction that he roller crimped. So, those little things come into play, and I lucked out here because I thought my lower biomass was, my falling point this year, but I could cultivate it because of that lower biomass. It worked out. So this is, I believe, my main points out here.
Have you cultivated each year, or just
is
this your first year?
Yeah, we cultivated last year also, and the soybeans. Yeah, it worked good. It worked good to address that. And
what cultivator are you using?
This Henniker back here. It's the 12-row Henniker with the high residue. Yeah, that's the cultivator that we use. Very happy with how this field looks, because the broadleaves you see will not be here in a week. I'm waiting on more to reach up above the canopy. for the weed zapper to work, things have to be above the canopy. So I'll come through here, and anything I touch will be gone when it touches that copper bar on the front of the weed zapper. And
Have you already run the zapper?
I ran it on the trial, and so we'll look at that in a moment. And I'll give
Do you
you.
have any worries about catching the mass on fire? Your head doesn't?
It can be an issue, yeah. My neighbor has already had a fire this year. Weed zapping his roller crimped rye. His soybeans are pretty small. I'm not worried about it, honestly, 2 weeks from now, because these beans are going to be at a height where they'll swallow up any small fires that start. And the fires that do start are usually on the outside grounding wheel, which you'll see on the side of that weed zapper. It completes the circuit. That grounding wheel, if it comes up off the ground, which can happen in row cultivated ground because it's bouncing around a little bit, you'll get an arc coming off of that grounding wheel, and that's where the risk of fire is.
Or when you go across the draw.
Yeah, if you go across the draws. If you mow your draws, then, they're going to catch on fire.
The
So.
wire comes loose.
The what? The wire?
Wire.
Yeah, it's probably all happened. Yeah. Yeah, so there is some risk of fire, and with a weed zapper, that's tricky because you can't just jump out of the cab. It's dangerous to get it. So you got to shut off the PTO. You got to wait for that PTO to stop, and then you get out of the tractor. There's a lot of safety mechanisms on the weed zapper, which give me confidence in its safety. But some of that is also common sense. You don't get out of the tractor with the PTO running, although it is supposed to be. It's properly grounded as is on that transformer. The weed zapper will kill the foxtail. Yeah. Now, if we get into late summer, that foxtail will turn cellulosic and won't be as what's the word? Conductive. Yeah. So that's true with all the broadleaves. The reason the broadleaves get killed so easily is because they're just very conductive. Yeah. About the foxtail, so I was doing some custom work around the area, and I'm still doing a little bit of that for neighbors, but when you go to somebody's field to do custom work, you really just want to go one time. They don't want you coming back multiple times and charge them $25 or $50 every plot, right? So when I'd go to neighbors, I just want to go one time. The thing is, with addressing foxtail, I'll want to be out here when it's just above the canopy before it gets too late in the month, and so that'd be a problem if I didn't own my own weed zapper. So you got to be on top of it, and it might take multiple passes.
How many times you foresee having to zap this field, you think?
I'll go through it twice.
Twice.
Yeah, there'd be little reason to do it more than that, but twice I believe will be warranted. Also, I'll give you a preface. In the trial, you're going to see where I did run one lap of the weed zapper. I got aggressive. You can be aggressive with the weed zapper, and there's no better way to demonstrate it than showing you that I tickled the beans all the way through where I ran the weed zapper off over here. So you'll see I tickled the beans, and the beans are set back slightly on the top, but they'll come back. I know they will. And there's no more broadleaves where I ran that weed zapper. It was a little early. It would have been better to wait a week, but I ran it 2 days ago.
You can blame it on me.
Kathleen said, let's run that before they come. So I ran it, and you'll see where that is. I'm going to think. What's that?
Weed cultivate this again.
I could weed cultivate it again. Depending on my control, I'm thinking it looks pretty good. So, weed cultivation costs fuel also. So it's likely to just get 2 passes with the weed zapper. I've had 45 bushels an acre in the 2 years I transitioned on my soybeans. Last year was 35 bushels an acre. Of course, I want that to be more, but the foxtail pressure is, I believe, what has held me back, around the plants. In this system, foxtail is my main issue at this point in time. And I wrestle with that a little bit. I would like to integrate more diversity out here and get control of those weeds, as we were talking about this morning, with integrating more livestock and more rotations out here. But ultimately, the market is what speaks to what a farmer can justify doing out here. a year ago, where we're standing right here, I did a pea trial, and those were purest peas. I did a 1/4 of an acre of peas right here. I don't feel like the field is any different here than in other places, but where we're standing, I did do a 1/4 of an acre of peas right here, and they produced 10 bushels an acre right here. My objective in doing that trial was to tell the people at Purist, hey, I think we could roller crimp peas into rye. And it was successful, and I believe that that is a possibility, but it didn't yield the pea, the volume of peas that would have justified harvesting it in that first time. But all trials deserve more than one shot. I think roller crimping rye could have a place in planting peas also in the future. So,
Levi, what has your weather been like since planting the beans?
Since this year,
planting the beans,
yeah, we had dry weather early on, and then good rains come. The rains have come about perfect. I was a bit nervous last week, thinking I may not get out here to get row cultivated, but it timed out well. I was able to row cultivate, and then we got another shower 3 days ago. So the rains have been very good this year. The moisture has been ideal this season for beans. Excuse me, let me just tell a quick story, sir. The first year I was transitioning, I rolled this down, and it didn't rain for a month. I rolled it down and planted beans at the same time, and it didn't rain for a month. And I just sat here looking at rolled down rye for a month. Like, okay, beans are under there. I see them. They were slowly emerging, and the field just sat here. It was so weird. But lo and behold, those were 45 bushel an acre soybeans, and that weird month of not having any rain once I had put the beans in the ground, was no big deal. And what Joel said this morning about planting down to moisture comes into play. That would have been the trick that year, is to think about my planting depth. So we planted corn planter, but over here you'll see the Dawn setup with rollers on it. We'll talk about that when Kathleen and I tell you about the field trial over here. But half the field trial is planted with that, and half with my 30-inch row planter and the Rodale style roller. And we'll get into that in just a few moments. I am now, as I mentioned, getting more serious about my need for fertility out here before I start to notice that I have been lacking lime and P and K. So I did a Haney test on the whole 60 acres a month ago, and now I know where everything is at. Boy, that Haney test with all those components would have been nice to have in 6 years ago, so I'd see how it changed. What I do know is that my organic matter on my my soil testing in 2017 showed that I had under 3% organic matter. This picture here, you can probably just barely see the colors. It's from 2.5 to 2.8 organic matter across this whole 60 acres. And right through the heart of the field, where it starts where we're standing and gets low, that was 2.5 and 2.8 organic matter. What my map, which I have now sweated on, tells you is that I'm sorry, it's not some big poster board, but the blue and green area, which again is the heart of this east field, is now all above 4% organic matter. Every bit of the blue and green is above the 4% organic matter. So in 7 years, I've increased soil organic matter 1%. What's the most important variable we should be looking at? Is it, carbon, because maybe someday we'll get paid for sequestering carbon? I don't know, but soil organic matter is the historical measure that we look at for soil health. And so I know that in 7 years I've increased my soil organic matter 1% across this entire field, and the 1% is 18,000 pounds of carbon. So 18,000 pounds per acre is what has been added to this, and so I'm very proud of that. I want to make sure that I keep that moving in the right direction by getting my my nutrients out here and addressing my P, K, and lime and other things, and we'll just keep building on the start. As a young organic farmer, knowing that there's so much expertise out there, and the guys and girls that have been doing it for decades, I feel humble to stand here and talk about my system. You know, it's just as easy for me to sit here and tell you all my limitations and weaknesses, but I know where I'm at, and I feel like I can be very proud of the steps I've taken to this point, and just knowing where I need to address that moving forward.
Do they take a whole bunch of different samples and then blend them all together, or do you get the different results from the different areas?
I had 5 zones out here, and so the 5 zones, the vast part of this 40 acres was one zone, and around the outside, basically the headland, was the second zone. And then this field, starting at the bends onto the gravel road, is another 40 with a creek running through it. And there were 3 zones in that, all of them distinguishable from this one. So there was already lower organic matter on that, which then historically you kind of look at a farm and you say, okay, this is a cattle barn. They didn't want to haul too far away from the barn, and so you just kind of know how that worked over the last 100 years. By the way, my grandfather and his father farmed this, and you know, my dad was born in the house that used to sit over there, and my dad was raised in the house that's over there and here, and so there's just a lot of that history that's a part of this farm and this family. And which brings me to what I was thinking maybe should be my very first point when I started this talk. When we talk all about diverse cover crops and bringing along the soil, and how we're going to develop our soil to grow these regenerative crops, the first question the first question to a farmer is, do I own this land? Because if it's going to get pulled out from under me, why would I invest in my soil prep? Case with a lot of the acres that my dad and I have been farming for, well, in my dad's case, for 40 some years, and in my case, I've seen farms sell that we've been leasing for the last couple generations, and families that move away sell their land, and highest bidder, right? So bringing along soil is most likely going to happen on land that you feel is going to be in your family for more generations, and that is a serious part of the conversation about why we bring along our soils, and so I think that's important.
Question over there. I just pulled a couple of these mare's tail plants up, and it doesn't seem like there's any mechanical damage to them, but they're clearly stressed. I assume that's just from the lifting that soil and drying that soil out. My question is, if you got a significant amount of rainfall after running that cultivator, do you see limited success with that? Or do you see less success than if you have dry weather after that cultivation pass?
By talking with my neighbors, we were well aware that if it rains within 48 hours, the foxtail is going to come again. Okay. And so that's why we were looking to shear that off at just 2 inches. I got 4-inch slabs on a good part of it before I got my cultivator set up right, and I was just really worried that that's going to reattach. And so the same would be true with the other things, and they could regrow, and the foxtail could also come back with rains. That's a limitation.
The main goal of that cultivator was the foxtail, not so much the mare's tail. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was really thinking foxtail.
Okay.
For damage.
Yeah, so
kill 'em,
roller crimpers don't kill broadleaves, I guess, is the lesson in that.
Well, soybeans are that way too. Got a big L on them. What do you add to
Soybeans, they have some crimping? Yeah, so there would be...
But they will yield more if they're crimped, right? Soybeans are straight.
Yeah, so there's some stress in the soybeans if you look closely, and so yeah, it's weird. Are soybeans going to have more nodulation because we have stressed them with the roller crimper? The science on that is inconclusive, but there's so many variables out there that I've learned to not sweat it too much. At the end of the season, it could be that I'm glad I stressed them. I stressed my soybeans in a certain way. What you're going to see in the trial is just the way it kind of timed out. My Rodale rolled soybeans were not at the third trifoliate, and so that meant where my tractor tires drove, because we had duals on, that ran over some rows of the trial, and those soybeans didn't come back, and so there's some space there. That demonstrates the importance that the soybeans have come along closer to the third trifoliate before driving around out there.
Do you have trouble with your bean head or dragging, like as soon as the sun goes down, it gets a little bit tough. Do you have any issues with the residue here?
No problems with the question was, does the soybean head drag through the residue? It has not been an issue. It was one of my biggest concerns that first year. And
Do you have
we have a
Gerber head?
35-year-old Case IH combine.
Oh.
So yeah, it comes through here.
Regular auger?
Yeah. And so there was no issue with the rye. The beans are a little dirtier because of the rye and the dust and things that are on it, but no issue. My producer that buys my organic soybeans says that they've seen a lot dirtier beans than mine when it comes to just the dust and stuff. So the soybean does a good job the soybean combine does a good job of cutting through it. My concerns were just as great though, because when I was going to come drag line manure on, that means there's a half-mile hoses that are constantly back and forth across the drug all over the place. I thought I might have a mess, but I have some YouTube video I should post and actually get on that topic. But it was wonderful. You know, we could drag line this, which lessens the compaction. We put the manure in, dragging that hose around here, and it did not drag around the mulch.
What time of the year did you do that?
Just after harvest, that was. Yeah.
What was your, sorry I missed your first part here, but what was your process here on these beans again? So
Okay,
planted into
good.
the standing rye or then crimped or?
Yes, thank you. So May 14th, planted these soybeans on the 60 acres. And then we waited till June 14th to roll them. Waited one full month.
How tall were the
And so they were well past anthesis, and we'll probably have some volunteer rye out here because we waited so long. The beans were 6 to 8 inches tall, and going into the third trifoliate. And so that has worked here, and it's worked every time I've tried that and been a part of it. Rolling the rye after the beans are up has worked. Okay. So at that, let's go over here and talk to the trial. I'll turn it over to Dr. DeLate, and she and I will tell you what we did over there and how that is distinguishable from this.
How tall was your rye when you planted?
The question I would have is, okay, let's say you would have just no-tilled corn and beans on a conventional system like you're doing, you know, and with a cover crop in between. Wouldn't have your organic matter increased with that also?
I think I know the research out there is that farmers are increasing their organic matter in those conventional fields where they're growing GMO crops and pulling off 200 plus yields of corn.
That's what
and
Dennis
60
Berger says.
plus yields as bushes. Did you mention Steve Berger?
Dennis Berger.
Oh, Dennis Berger. Okay.
Steve
So,
Berger. Steve Berger.
yeah. So Steve Berger's been at this for more than 3 decades. Lots and lots of biomass in his field, and he's doing it because the soil seed farms needs it. They need that cover, and so he advocates, and he's correct. The research shows that we're increasing organic matter in our GMO fields also. They're conventional, they're using chemicals and GMO seeds, and they're increasing their organic matter. So we can have our industrial systems also.
So what is the thought process of having the roller right in front of the planter and having it split up by each row versus in front of the tractor?
The question is, what's the thought process in having the roller in front of the tractor versus in front of the planter? When I transitioned this, I had a front hitch on that tractor. That tractor's 25 years old, and we found it's hard to clean the radiator out when you have a front hitch on the front. And guess what happens to rye pollen when you're out here in anthesis? It goes into the radiator. So we pulled that front hitch off. But a couple years ago, the USDA came out and did a video called Fridays on the Farm. You can YouTube it. And the Fridays on the Farm talked about the one system approach because we were rolling and planting at the same time. Now I'm kind of transitioning to the school of thought of decoupling the two processes. But hey, it's cool to be out there getting it all done in one pass. And so it worked good. And that's what happens over here. You're getting it done in one pass, and it's behind the tractor instead of in front.
Was this experiment with this and that done at a later time? This little bitty here, right here.
Yeah, it was done 3 weeks later. So I don't know that we've actually said the planting date here. So here, first let me review. May 14th, and then rolled on June 14th for the 60 acres. But the trial was planted on June 4th.
Okay.
All right, both implements, June 4th. And then we rolled it, when we rolled the rest of it, June 14th. All right. I'm getting out my banjo. If you have more questions, I'm around. Bow them cabbage down. A or G? All right. Old Joe Clark. Cripple Creek. Go ahead. Thank you. All right, Little Brown Jug. This is called Lover's Walk. page. End of the line. Yeah, you want to hold on to your seats for this one. Sometimes we have this little competition who can play faster. Don't start too fast, or you'll lose me. All right, thank you.
Thank you guys. What a nice bonus. Let's do it again next year.
Sounds good.
If anybody's interested, Kelowna Bluegrass Festival is July 22nd, 3rd, and 4th.
This
July.
weekend.
This weekend at the Windmill Ridge Campground.
Yep, and we may be over there.
Are you featured?
July 22nd. We're not a feature, but we could show
That's
up.
awesome.
They are on YouTube though. Music at the
Yeah,
Mill.